Okay, so again, Weldon, thank you so much for joining us today. To get started, if you would just tell us a little bit about your background, what's your education and experience prior to starting Mind Games, and how did you develop this specialty?
Um, I don't know how far back you want to go.
As
I
far
think
back as we have time for, I suppose.
I guess it started when I was 5 years old, and I first jumped into a pool and started swimming. And I basically did that for 19 years.
Uh-huh.
And so I was an athlete in college, and I got injured.
Mm,
And after college, I became a teacher, and realized that I really like that like instructor student relationship.
mm,
That's a really um, interesting dynamic and something that I really like. And it wasn't until I think 3 years into my teaching career that I started swimming again and realized that my coach in university had been the one who'd injured me, not myself, not my own body.
oh,
And
wow.
that kind of really like set me off a little bit and made me realize that there's like a difference in quality of coaching coaches who really care about their athletes versus coaches who can like just push them and throw them away and when they get hurt. And so uh, I started looking more into coaching instead of teaching, and that kind of went along until 2009 when I decided when I injured my own athlete and was like, whoa, I need to learn a little bit more about what I'm doing in terms of motivation because I just like put. I mean, the person had set personal bests, and I mean, physically, I was doing a fantastic job of coaching them, but I'd over motivated them, and I just wanted to get a handle on like what was happening in the mind when I was working with athletes, and so that's when I went to study sports psychology. And after sports psychology, after my sports psychology master's, I was kind of stuck in Finland, enjoying this new
Are
country.
you really stuck in Finland, though? Is that the question?
Enjoying this new country that I had subjected myself to.
Yeah, of course.
Uh, and started watching esport instead of playing video games, which was a nice transition
Hmm.
because it's easier to turn off a game you're watching than it is to turn off a game you're playing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I just saw that they really needed uh, an they really needed an advantage. I mean, I saw people breaking down on stage. I saw people, like crack under the pressure constantly, and I realized that they really had no background in sport in terms of like growing up through competition
Right.
and achieving a high level of performance through competition. Instead, they achieved a high level of competition, or sorry, a high level of performance through the global online ladder, which is it is a stressful competitive environment, but it's not like getting on stage every weekend,
Right.
which you might do like as a soccer player or as a swimmer.
Yeah, or having thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars at stake. Uh,
Right, money at stake.
yeah, big money. Um, and so you kind of dipped into this a little bit. There's a continuing and evolving debate around the growth of esports and its comparison to other traditional games like football and basketball and traditional athletics. And so maybe expand a little bit on the link between the psychology of sports and the psychology of professional video gaming. If there is a link, and are there particular changes uh, to, not necessarily the brain specifically, but maybe to personalities or the way that people interact that are common to both when you're in this professional environment?
There's no difference between the two.
Hmm.
So another name for the field of sports psychology is performance psychology. And some of the things that operate in the brain as performance, for example, are test taking, musical performance, sport performance, leadership, speech giving, sex,
Hmm.
performing a video game. So basically, performance psychology is quite similar across all of those domains. And when you get better at one of them, you get better at all of them. Maybe not the mechanical aspects, like you don't get better at sex when you train video games, but you get better at performing in sex when you get better at performing on stage,
Hmm.
because they're both performance aspects. So you use the same kind of tools that you develop for sustained focus and ignoring distractions and overcoming choking.
Interesting. Um, is is your coaching focused on changing? I mean, changing the way that when they're performing when they're doing this performance, or literally accessing specific parts of the brain for types of competition, or do you see both the sport aspect and the gaming aspect as accessing the same parts of the brain? I think you might have answered this a little bit, but maybe.
Um, it's it's the same. It's a sport movement.
Hmm.
So we have in esport we have analysts and pro players. I think there's a kind of a maybe a divide there, and because we imagine that an analyst can like analyze the game but can't really necessarily play it at a top level, but might have the same insight as a pro, and a pro might not even be able to analyze the game but can play it at a top level, and the difference is where they kind of store their knowledge. So professional athletes and professional esport athletes both store their ability kind of in a different part of the brain than the analysis section, than the logic section, than the frontal lobe. We store it closer into the brain stem, where we have motor reflexes, where we have visual processing, and so you see a pattern and you react to it based on training that you've done. So it's visual into interpreting, making a decision very swiftly, and then having a reflex motor movement. And the fact that it's like pressing a finger down isn't that much different as far as the brain's concerned between like kicking a football. It's just a finesse of muscle control at that point.
Right.
But as far as like processing in the brain, it's the same. Like it's an athletic motor movement.
And so so basically the physical aspect of sports competition, of competitive gaming, because obviously when people watch esports players, they're like, oh, they're not really athletes, they're not in the gyms, in the gym doing bench presses and running laps and things like that, trying to get ready for the game. But it's still as exhausting as far as the brain is concerned to perform a high level Dota game then?
So actually, the brain uses generally the same amount of energy, whether you're sitting on the couch, passed out, like watching TV, or whether you're, engaged in high stakes competition. So it's the use of other resources that determines like your kind of exhaustion state. I think not energy, but maybe things like neurotransmitters. We don't really completely understand fatigue as a concept. There are theories about why the brain fatigues the body when the body is tired, and there are concepts and theories about why the brain perceives fatigue when it has bouts of high focus. And neither of those appear to be gated by like molecules of energy, because we seem to have plenty left over at certain points. So it's got to be something else. And there are plenty of neurotransmitters and resources in the brain that are used in competition, whether you're on a soccer field or on a stage. And so, yeah, the exhaustion is quite similar. But then, of course, like in sport, you have physical exhaustion, physical fatigue, and that's a very different section of the.
Yeah.
That's a different governor, I would say, in the brain that controls that.
Okay. So you help coach esports athletes across various platforms and games. Would you say there are particular challenges to a certain game type, or even within the same genre, like for MOBAs, like Dota or League of Legends or Heroes of the Storm, distinctions made among players and their psychological hurdles?
Yeah, I think like coaching League of Legends, I think is a very similar mental resilience activity compared to the marathon. And coaching CSGO is more similar to tennis, for example. So in tennis, one of the most important things is the reset, being able to go into a point with a 0-0, mind frame, and saying like, okay, if I clutch this point, like even if they have the advantage, like I win. The game is 0-0. It's not 14-0. It's not 0-14.
Right.
in order to keep that pressure kind of normalized, or if you're 14-0, to keep the relaxation from creeping in
Mm-hmm.
to your focus.
Yeah, because if you
And
relax, yeah.
unfortunately, with League of Legends, it's kind of the opposite. It's like the most important part of the game is the first 5 minutes, and if you get behind there, you have to have intense pushing and intense focus and intense effort for the next maybe 20, 30 minutes, just for the possibility of maybe perhaps winning the game. And if you don't do that, you're never going to pull it off. So I think if you look at like tennis players and you look at marathon athletes, so the human body peaks more or less physically at the age of 26, 27 for males. And what you see in marathon is that people start winning internationally and setting world records closer to 31 through 33 years old. There are prodigies that like hit that earlier.
Right.
But overall, it takes a number of years of running the marathon at your peak in order to develop the mental resilience to actually win it. And so it's a tough sport. And I see League of Legends as one of the hardest mental sports, mentally tough sports in esport right now, because I mean, if you're winning, everything's fine, but if you're losing, the mental resilience required to last 30 to 45 minutes in the face of a losing bout, and like keep up the fighting spirit and keep up and like choose that turning point and all in on it is really, really aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it takes playing together as a team for 6 months or a year to kind of like start building up that resilience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Ever when I was a kid, and I think when a lot of us are a kid, moms and adults would caution us from playing video games too much. It's like there are ways that competitive gaming actually helps to promote mental health. Um, so in what ways do you see that it actually does promote mental health? In what ways do you see it maybe diminishing mental health, or maybe having a negative impact on a player? And would you say there's a shelf life for most esports athletes until they're inevitably burnt out? Kind of like, you can't play pro football forever. You can only handle getting, clocked in the head so many times on Sunday
Mm-hmm.
for inevitably have to retire. Would you say that's similar with esports athletes?
So as far as promoting mental health, I mean, competitive gaming has the same potential as youth sport for being a developmental engine for humans. And one of the big things that stands in the way of that is the global anonymous ladder. So you compete globally and you compete more or less anonymously. And that's almost useless as far as a competitive environment for developing yourself. So once amateur esport looks more like youth sport, like you compete locally, you compete live, and you compete with a coaching infrastructure, then we have all of a sudden all of the good parts of sport coming into the equation. So what are the transferable skills that your parents expect you as a kid to pick up on the soccer pitch? Things like leadership, social skills, social and emotional skills, discipline, a good bit of health from running around, exercising your brain by thinking about the game and exercise and learning finesse, motor movements. So all of those things, aside from the health aspect of standing up and running,
Yeah.
are just as equally accessible in a like team training environment with an esport coach that knows what the heck they're doing.
Right.
And then otherwise it's a pretty destructive environment. It's actually, there's if you're just like training on the global ladder to become a pro and you don't make it, there's only a few people that gain from that exercise in terms of transferable life skills. Now, as far as affecting the brain, there's plenty of interesting effects of gaming that gaming has on the brain. And there's a book, I think, Super Better by Jane McGonigal that highlights a lot of those from the medical perspective. Flow state being one of the big advantages of like gaming. But yeah, from a mental health perspective, you can actually use gaming to heal the brain in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
and when I say gaming, I mean games as a mechanism. It doesn't necessarily have to be a video game. It could be role playing or things like that.
Right. And
And
yeah, the
about
shelf life
shelf
part.
life
Yeah.
for esport athletes.
Mhm.
If you look at sports like lower impact sports, like swimming,
Mhm.
you can see athletes having 20-year Olympic careers.
Mhm.
Like I think Phelps is going into his fourth Olympics now. And not only that, he just put up times in December that were faster than the world records that were being set in Russia. So Russia was where the World Championships was being held while he was competing in Texas.
Hmm.
So yeah, so you can have a pretty extended career in a lot of sports, and esport is one of the lowest impact and least
Right.
probably injurious sports out there.
Yeah.
Reflexes don't start decaying till your mid to late 50s. Actually, it can be late 40s, but if you train them and sustain them, it can be much later. So yeah, I imagine that. So burnout is an interesting thing. There's two aspects to that. One is motivation, which motivation is cyclical. It simply goes up and down based on the day and the environment and stressors and support network and stuff like that. So you can have like motivationally low days and quote unquote motivational burnout when you need to restore yourself because you overtrained or overpushed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other kind of burnout is simply when you lose your drive or your ambition. There's not really anything sport psychology or a support network can do about that. That's just you either want it or you don't, and that's something that's installed kind of by you and who you are and what you want to do with your life. So I see burnout as either the low point in the motivational cycle, which can be worked on
Right.
with like restorative kind of practices, or just your ambition or your drive was killed or overextended or never existed strongly enough in the first place. You didn't actually want it. You wanted something else. And so that's a different question. It's not really necessarily always burnout in that case.
Yeah. So you would say, I mean, if it is that second mode of burnout, then it's not really something that's coachable or something that's overcome that you could overcome. It's more like, okay,
No, nor would
they've
I want
chosen.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't
You
want to
know,
push them into that.
you should do what you want to do.
Right.
And I try to help people understand what they want to do. So a lot of people like coast. They get to a point where it's not really part of their drive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they keep doing it because they think that they have to or they've invested time into it. And the more brave option is to simply say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this other thing. And to quit and all in on the other thing that they were doing. Once you know that your ambition is pointed in a different direction.
All right. So shifting away a little bit from the professional side of things, I'm guessing that you're a gamer yourself. So what are you currently playing right now, or what do you do to distract yourself when you're not doing coaching or watching esports?
Yeah, I haven't really played video games since I started coaching esport
Mm.
because that corresponded with the birth of my first child, and now I have almost 3, and so
Yeah.
I don't. I no longer distract myself from anything because I have either work or children to take care of.
Among the esports then that you kind of monitor and watch for professional purposes, which do you enjoy watching the most? Which do you think is the most spectator friendly?
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Right when you said that, I started remembering how tired I am of taking care of kids. Staying up late. Not staying up
Yeah,
late. Getting up late.
that's the embodiment right there. That yawn is just the
Yeah, there you go.
materialization of having 3.
Um, League of Legends, definitely.
Yeah.
Because the production quality is just so high.
Mm-hmm.
The casters are entertaining and insightful and hilarious at times.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that are being told are really fun and thought out, planned, and produced.
Yeah.
So it's the most entertaining. and I watch for entertainment and for the story and for my original fandom of certain pro games.
Yeah.
Or certain pro players.
Hmm. Who are some of the players that you really enjoy watching?
Oh, Hotshot GG and Reginald. The TSM CLG rivalry in League of Legends.
Yeah.
The old classics.
Like old school. So before we wrap up, Weldon, I just wanted to give you a chance to share some resources for those out there listening who might be interested in your services, as well as can learn more about what you do.
I might need to yawn again. Just a sec.
No problem.
It kind of triggered me, set me off. That first yawn.
Yeah, it's contagious.
Ended my morning. Okay, so if you're interested in coaching, if you're from the coaching aspect, I have a new project I'm working on called the Esport Coaching Network, and so you can find that at esportcoaching.net. But if you're interested in getting coaching or being coached, then it's mindgames.gg. And there might be a little blip around April 1st because I'm building a new website and we're going to convert stuff over. So right now, like, you can't